Well, we want to thank everybody for taking your time tonight to be with us as we have the North Carolina Unique Pathways to Biology and Life Science STEM careers. We're excited about this. We have been hosting these for the last couple of months, and we've done two different installations. One was on medical and healthcare, and then the other one was on computer sciences, AI, and all those things technology wise. It's been great. We will have this one as well. Each one of these will be hosted and put onto a playlist for you all, but as well for anybody that is not able to make it tonight, we will have these as well sent to them by email. So that's great that they won't miss out on anything like this. We are what we call the North Carolina Collaborative for Advancing Student-Led Research. As you can see here on the first slide, it's a collaboration of 4 different organizations. Each one of us do have various competitions that we host and partner with, but in addition to that, we come together to do outreach and support your development, whether you be a student, a teacher, or even as a parent, to learn more about how to get into research, what competition looks like. And if any of you are doing any research, you know how that can foster into different competitions with the same research. So we are bringing you tonight the biology and life science version of our programming. And I will turn it over to our MC, or our host of the evening. Our moderator is Lori. And Lori is coming to us from Appalachian State. Her name is Mrs. Tyler, right, Lori?
Lori, please.
And she is our director of summer ventures and science and math up at Appalachian State. So I'll turn it over to you, Lori.
Thanks, Steffiana, and welcome to everyone tonight. We're really excited to have the opportunity to meet and to learn from our panelists, and just to find out a little bit more about their pathways and their STEM careers, and to give you the opportunity to ask questions. And so again, our collaborative is made up of people who work with the North Carolina Science and Engineering Fair, North Carolina Student Academy of Science, the International Science Challenge, Junior Science and Humanities Symposium, as well as a host of other contests and competitions and just research opportunities through the North Carolina School of Science and Math, etc. So we're so glad you're here tonight, and we hope that you will take advantage of the opportunity to ask questions. We do ask that you use the chat format feature, and we will monitor that chat with your questions. And we look forward to a great discussion tonight. So the first thing we will want to do is we want to ask you a question, students, parents, other people that are here with us tonight, is what questions are floating around in your head about education or career paths? Obviously, tonight we're talking about life sciences and biology. What are some things you might be hoping to learn in our discussion tonight, so that we can sort of, lay some groundwork on some initial questions? So I'll pause for a minute. If you want to add some questions into the chat, we welcome that. And not everyone at once. And that's okay. You may not have any questions. You may be just kind of on the cusp of just saying, hey, I'm just curious, and I want to see what's going on with our panelists. So here we have somebody who's really interested in biomedical engineering, biotechnology.
That's awesome.
Good questions. Are they doing today what they thought they were going to start off with when they started their educational careers or work careers? How do we get support for advanced research topics? Financial support, as well as mentoring support, supplies, materials, all those are good questions. Mentoring is huge. And once you kind of understand that world of academia, you know that mentoring is important, but that's also true in the workplace as well. What other questions do we have here? Getting connected as a ninth grader, that's important. Yes, I mean, there are a lot of programs out there. I'll just put in a little plug for Summer Ventures in Science and Math. You know, I'm going to do that, Stephanieana and the others. That program is for juniors and seniors. So you would apply during your 10th grade or your 11th grade year. So check out Summer Ventures. It is a cost-free program supported by our state, but there are a host of other programs. The North Carolina School of Science and Math has a great resource on their website about research opportunities. Outside of research and academia, what else can you do with biology? Oh, there's a great question. I mean, I was just talking with someone today who works for the Watauga River Keepers Association and was finding out that the drinking water going into our water treatment plants is cleaner than most water coming out of water treatment plants in other areas across our state and country. So that was kind of interesting. So these are all very good questions. Thank you so much. Middle schoolers, yes, we're going to talk about those things. We've got a lot of resources available for you, job shadowing. So we're really excited to get started tonight, and I appreciate those questions. And again, as questions pop up, as each of the panelists speak, please feel free to pop them in the chat, and we'll go back and try to address those at various times throughout our talk tonight. So we'd like to introduce our panelists. And so we have each one of them individually, and we're going to ask the panelists to, give us a brief introduction of who you are and, and what you do and what's your current field of study or what is your current career in STEM. And in that discussion, we'd like you to keep that around the 2 to 5 minute mark. And just think about what are some of these challenges in your field and tell us about it. So we're going to start tonight with Dr. Jenny Hernandez Davies, who is the Assistant Project Scientist at UCI Vaccine R&D Center. And so we're going to pause the slideshows and we're going to let Dr. Davies introduce herself.
Okay, hi everybody. As Lori said, my name is Dr. Davies. I work at UC Irvine. All of you have probably heard of a little pathogen called SARS-CoV or heard about the SARS-CoV vaccine. So I work in vaccine science. I do research and development for vaccines, and I grew up viruses in the lab. But we basically test all sorts of different vaccines that we develop for SARS, for influenza, the flu, as well as for other pathogens like Ebola. So we have quite a few microorganisms that we work with. So a lot of these we grow up here in the lab. We do different mouse models, in vitro models, which is working in the lab with cells and plates. I don't know how much exposure you had to that, but basically we do all sorts of different studies in mice to see how effective vaccines are at generating immune responses, at protecting mice after we challenge them with virus. So we're basically quite busy at the moment. I actually did not start off thinking I would be a scientist. My parents did not go to college, so I was the first in the family to go to college. So I knew that I had an interest in science, but I always thought that I would just have to be a doctor. So I went that path, and I basically took a lot of science courses in high school, AP courses in high school. And I learned from my teachers. I asked a lot of questions from them. I said, what if I want to do research? What if I want to do this? And they educated me a lot about different opportunities. I got involved in like the science fair at school, and just basically just started building on that. And then I went to undergrad at USC, and then I decided that I wanted to pursue research. So then I ended up going to grad school at UCLA, and I studied cancer biology. So I did a lot of work looking for drugs that would help individuals get treated or therapeutics for cancer. So that's basically what I did. And then I got interested in infectious diseases, and here I am. So
We got quite a few questions here actually about your work there.
Oh,
The students wanted to know, or a parent, sorry if I'm not
yeah.
misreading that. What are some of the ways that you do to test vaccines?
Well, basically we do well, first of all, we do in vitro models, so working with cells. So we basically see if we immunize mice with the different vaccines. And then after we immunize the mice, we collect their blood. And in their blood would be antibodies that are used to kind of fight the vaccine. So we basically treat either cells or we challenge those mice with the virus. So we infect them with the virus and we see if they survive or if they don't survive. And that gives us a good indication as to whether the vaccine is effective or not. And then we look at, does it make antibodies? Does it make different types of immune cells like CD4, CD8 T cells that are all involved in your immune system? So we like to learn all about your immune system and how you're protected.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna wait on the other questions so that you can get through your panel, Lori. Is that okay?
Yeah, no problem. Those are all great questions, and we'll go back. I'll scroll back through the chat. So, thank you so much. Very fascinating things, and look, starting to think about, you mentioning, trying to figure out, do I want to be a doctor? I'm good in biology, and here's my path there. So, thank you so much. Our next panelist is Dr. Leggett, who's an associate professor of forestry science here at North Carolina State in the College of Natural Sciences. So Dr. Leggett, thanks for being here tonight. Look forward to hearing your introduction.
Yes, can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I have little people home, so hopefully they won't disturb me while I'm introducing myself. So I'm Zakia Leggett. As she mentioned, I'm a professor in the College of Natural Resources at North Carolina State. A little bit about my background. I actually went to a boarding school for high school. So it was cool when I met my husband because he went to the School of Science and Math. And so we could share stories about being at boarding school. But as I mentioned earlier to the panelists, I'm originally from Memphis, Tennessee. If you have been to Memphis, you know it is considered one of the barbecue capitals of the world. But I was actually raised vegan in Memphis, which like blows people's mind. Like, you've never had Memphis barbecue? But anyway, so my mom raised me with a very deep appreciation of nature. She was probably what some would consider a nature lady back in the day when it wasn't really popular. So I went to Tuskegee for undergrad, which is in Alabama, and we had a dual degree program set up with Duke. So that's how I ended up in North Carolina. So I went to Tuskegee for 3 years, Duke for 2 years, and we're able to get a bachelor and a master's degree in 5 years. So it was a really cool program. I've since set up a dual degree program with Tuskegee here at NC State. So we've had some Tuskegee students do that program since I've been here. As far as challenges, as mentioned, I'm in the field of forestry, which is not extremely diverse, thinking about racial ethnic diversity, as well as having many women. And so I finished up at Duke, did my PhD at State, and went right into forest industry. In full transparency, there were lots of challenges in the field, working in the field and trying to, I guess, find my place, as some would say. But I feel like having come back to the university, having left industry, I've been really trying to make it my goal to help students from different backgrounds get integrated into forestry, learn about forestry. So I look forward to answering your questions, because a lot of people are always like, what is forestry? What do you do? But my specific expertise is in soil ecology. So I look at how the soil microbial communities process nutrients. I also look at carbon sequestration, and I look at forest ecology as a whole. So looking at how the ecosystem kind of ties itself together when looking at the above and below ground. Lastly, I do some work in citizen science. If you're not familiar with citizen science, I could talk about that for days. But I do some work here on campus and in the community related to citizen science. And I have several programs focused on diversity and inclusion. So I lead a couple undergraduate research programs here at State trying to increase the number of students of color in forestry and ecology. And then for students who are here, my deadline has passed, but I lead a high school research program as well. This will be my 3rd year, where students do research with me and some of my graduate students for 4 weeks. So if people have questions about that, I can share more. So I will stop there and turn it back over.
Thank you so much, Dr. Leggett. I'm really interested because, like I said, with our Summer Ventures research projects, I'm learning more about soil and carbon and good stuff. My background's math, so I'm a sponge when it comes to science. So thank you for sharing, and we look forward to learning more about your work. Next, we have Dr. Ricardo Ekme, who is a Senior VP at Nutrition and Product Development is it Arbiome?
Arbiome.
Arbiome. Thank you. I apologize for mispronouncing. But thank you for sharing and your story with us tonight.
Absolutely, and thank you for having me. As Lori mentioned, I'm the Senior VP of Nutrition and Product Development. Largely, I oversee our R&D for Arbiome. We're an agricultural technology startup company based out of Durham. Someone posed the question of whether what I'm doing now is what I foresaw myself doing when I was much younger. The answer is no. Probably related, but no. Aside from my current role, I'm also an assistant professor at the University of Arkansas in poultry science. Originally, I am from Los Angeles, so I grew up very much a city kid. I knew I loved animals, but for anyone that grows up in LA, animals means dogs, cats, and pigeons. So that is what and of course, if you love animals, what do? Right? What's your career choice? You're a vet, right? That's and for most of my youth, that's what I assumed I would be doing, becoming a vet. And for the most part, that's the trajectory I kind of set my sights on. So I did do quite a bit related to that, either working in animal shelters, taking relevant coursework. But one thing that I did do, and I think this is an important lesson that's kind of held true throughout my career, has been maintaining activities outside of my particular field. So I did quite a bit of music when I was in middle school, high school, and college, and playing in orchestras and so on and so forth. To the point where I was taking up just as much time as my particular career choice. And one thing I've come to learn and appreciate is a lot of what makes a really good science is being able to pilfer from other fields. And you don't really get to pilfer unless you have a foot in those other fields as well. So that's paid tremendous dividends as I've kind of advanced through my career. Going into undergrad, so I went to Cornell for undergrad. I majored in animal science, and once again thinking I was going to go to vet school. But as part of my undergrad experience, I started working in research labs. I started to get to know our food system, so actual animal agriculture, and basically fell in love with how we make food here in this world. So I moved more towards research, and in particular food systems and animal agriculture. I ended up getting a master's and PhD in poultry science, although I think at this juncture I've mostly touched every part of our food system, whether it is planting corn or soybean in a field, or all the way to where I currently am, which is generating the next generation of alternative proteins. Dr. Leggett mentioned being vegan. A lot of what I do is also creating new products that are more sustainable and can address a lot of needs, whether it's for flexitarians or folks that would prefer a vegan vegetarian lifestyle, but also creating better products that create healthier people and healthier food systems and a healthier planet. So that's a little bit about me.
Thank you, Dr. Ekme. I must say that I'm very fascinated by research and nutrition from a poultry science perspective. So I look forward to hearing more about your journey. And so Last but not least, our fourth panelist tonight is Dr. James Tyus, whose title is Learning Enablement Partner, which makes me very curious as to what that entails. And so, Dr. Tyus, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Title might sound bigger than it is. You know, Dr. Ekme said something that resonated with me about being able to pull or pilfer from other fields, right, and put that together. The other thing that strikes me is the importance of like relationships and collaborations with folks outside of your immediate field. And so with that, I want to give a quick shout out to the organizers of tonight's event, because as I'm listening to the other panelists, everything that y'all are saying, there's something that resonates with me with everything that y'all said. Dr. Davies says she's working in vaccines. The work that we do is primarily in vaccines and also medicated feed additives. Dr. Leggett said that she's, you know, first of all, she's from Memphis. I'm from Nashville. So, you know, shout out to the Tennessee folks. But just being in agriculture and working with students and diversity issues is something that I've been trying to work on in my career as well. Dr. Ekme is a poultry scientist by training. So am I. I'm a poultry scientist by training too. And so it's a small world. I'm glad to get to meet my fellow panelists, and I hope we stay connected beyond this. So that's my 30 seconds. James Ty, so I do work with a company called Zoetis. If you've never heard of Zoetis, Zoetis is actually the largest animal health company in the world. Up until about 2013, we were Pfizer. So you probably heard of Pfizer with COVID vaccines and all of that. We were Pfizer Animal Health. And then in 2013, we spun off into our own company and continued to work to support animal health through medicated feed additives, through vaccines, through bio devices, and other health initiatives. My work with Zoetis is, as my title says, I'm a learning enablement partner, which means that I'm responsible for training about 100 or so scientists and veterinarians, sales professionals, service providers, engineers that make up the U.S. poultry business within Zoetis. And so that's my charge, is to train them on, it could be technical training around, you know, anatomy and poultry science and disease. It could be product training around some new product or vaccine that we're about to launch. It can be, you know, some of my work, some of my time is spent doing things like producing podcasts and videos for that team for training purposes. Other times I'm in the field and I'm joining them, and I'm going to visit customers to talk about either our products and solutions, or to try to identify what kind of issues the customers may be dealing with as they produce meat and eggs. And so I've been with Zoetis for about 3 years. It'll be 3 years next week. Prior to that, I worked for a smaller, sort of more boutique company, also in the animal nutrition space. I started off as an animal researcher. So I was a lead animal nutritionist doing animal research, primarily with chickens, but also I did some research with pigs and a little bit with aqua, with fishes as well. And then I did some training with that company as well, more international. So most of my work was done in Southeast Asia, Vietnam, and Thailand, but also in India, Nepal, and in South America, like Peru and Brazil. So I would spend about 75% of my time sort of outside of the country training our team members and our customers around the world. Prior to doing that kind of work and doing that job, I actually worked in Washington, D.C. for a few years. When I came out of college, I really got interested in agricultural policy. I got interested in the policy that shapes our ability to have a strong, robust, and safe food system. And so I went to D.C. and I worked in Congress for 2 years on the Appropriations Committee and on the House Agriculture Committee, helping to support the work that was being done there. And then taking a step backwards, from there, I was in graduate school. I did a PhD in agricultural biotechnology with a focus on poultry, genomics, and nutrition. I also have a master's degree in animal nutrition. And I've loved biology all my life. So that's kind of a little bit about me going backwards, and I'm looking forward to answering y'all's questions tonight.
Thank you so much. I mean, I'm sitting here reeling, just trying to not generate a whole list of questions of my own, and I want the participants to have the opportunities to ask these questions. Well, some of you did touch on your college experiences, but I'm kind of curious, since a lot of our participants are middle school, high school students and teachers at the moment, what would be some advice you have talking about your own high school pathway? How did you decide areas of study for undergraduate, and what are some of your interests? So how did you get to where you are now from thinking back when you were in high school? And thank you again for the questions that are coming up in the chat. We'll cipher through those here shortly. And so I don't have any particular order. I'll just let each of the panelists just to share a little bit about maybe from your high school path, what were maybe some things that you wish you had known, or that you'd wish you'd thought about, or you'd been mentored, or things like that. Any advice you have for our students and teachers and participants?
So I can take a first stab at that one. So in general, I do think a general trajectory is important. So I do think some forethought into kind of the general direction you want to go in is step one. I think for a lot of people, you'd be surprised how ingrained STEM is in life in general. I've given kind of a little talk in various schools where I point out, hey, like in some ways I'm a sneakerhead. Like I love Jordans, I love the LeBrons, I love Kobe's, and you'd be surprised how much just technology is in something as simple as footwear. Even right now, I'm wearing a pair of shoes called Allbirds, where the soles are made from palm, right? So it's a very sustainable way of turning biomass or kind of trees into foam for footwear, right? And there's just so much technology that's kind of embedded in almost every aspect of our life that I do think that we can look at something that we're generally passionate about, and there's likely STEM involved in that passion, right? So having a general trajectory that's led by something that you're just naturally inclined, naturally interested in, whether if you're interested in cooking, you can be a food scientist. I mean, certainly you can be a chef or a cook, but you can also be a food scientist, a food technologist, engineer, so on and so forth. There's almost no field, no interest that does not have some STEM component to it. So general trajectory is kind of the first step. And then the second one, it's okay to meander. It's more than okay to meander quite a bit. Like I said, that's probably going to be one of your greatest strengths as you kind of flesh out into being, whatever you end up doing. That's a trait, that's an attribute. So as you kind of look towards kind of your ultimate goal, certainly do the coursework that you need to do, take the exams that you need to take, certainly look for internships and opportunities or volunteer opportunities in the fields that you're interested in. But don't feel like if you do something else that it's taking away from that, right? It's likely going to complement it quite a bit. But in general, I think that's largely how I like to view things. Have a general trajectory, shoot in a particular direction. That road might be windy, but as long as you're heading in a particular direction, I think that's step one.
Yeah, I was going to piggyback off of that. I think one of the things that happened for me during my freshman year, I had a summer that I spent as a wildlife biologist, which for most people is like, whoa, that's amazing. Well, I had to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. And that like scratched it off my list, right? So just piggybacking off what was suggested, sometimes an experience can actually teach you what you don't want to do. So it definitely was not a waste of my summer, because it just confirmed to me, okay, Zakia, you're not the type that gets excited about listening to birds at 4 a.m. So I think taking advantage of experiences would be a takeaway for me. I think that was something that really helped enrich my experience as an undergrad, taking advantage of non-traditional experiences, because I never would have thought I would go into forestry, but taking advantage of trying out different programs, because in some ways that's the time. Preferably you do that in high school, but if you don't have that opportunity in high school, I would say your freshman and sophomore year, try out different things. So.
Yeah, I have to second that as well. Just learning what your strengths are, learning what you're passionate about. I think having the experience in different things will help you realize what your strengths are. And I know in terms of, in high school, your main, if you're interested, for example, in science, you want to just make sure that you take AP Bio, take an Phys, take any of the courses that interest you while you're in high school, and check with your counselor, check with your teachers. Are there any summer research programs that are available to high school students? You have to speak to people. Oftentimes, when you're younger and you're middle school, you're in high school, you're shy and you're afraid to reach out to teachers, but they're actually there to help you. And yeah, you'll get some time they don't want to help, but there's a lot more than do want to help than not. So just putting yourself out there. And then there's tons of programs in college. Community colleges have biotechnology programs. So if you want to go into research, you want to do clinical lab science, so that you can detect like the presence of different pathogens that are circulating at the moment. I mean, just get in there, and like Zakia said, you might realize that you don't like being in the lab. Maybe you're more of a people person and you like interacting with people more. There's scientific fields where you can do that, but if you didn't put yourself out there, you won't know that about yourself. So talk to people, build your base, and it's good for letters of recommendation too, for colleges, for when you want to go to grad school. If people get to know you and how committed and interested you are in a certain field or what you're all about, they'll write you a much better letter than if you just come up to them like, and you don't even know them, right? So.
Yeah, and I think the only thing I would add is, I think what I'm hearing from the panelists too is the power of sort of exposure and experiences along the way. I would just add that exposure and those experiences don't necessarily have to be through structured programs, right? You don't necessarily have to do a whole summer internship. Find opportunities to shadow folks, right? If you can shadow somebody from a day, I guarantee you'll find something that may resonate with you that you really like, or you may find something that you really don't like. You know what? This is a 4 a.m. morning. This is not for me. But I think students can take advantage of shadowing programs or less structured programs to get some exposure and some experiences. And I think that would be helpful for a lot of folks.
I wanted to ask a quick question of James. When you said you were in training, that's more of a communication skill set that maybe biology or life sciences doesn't provide. Can you tell them how you got into that side of it, even though you started in the research? I hope that will help clear up some things for the kids as well.
Yeah, sure. So I would say for me, really where it started was when I was in college. We were going through normal class coursework and starting to get into research and doing some things. But one of the things that I realized pretty early on, especially in graduate school, was that there wasn't enough sort of enrichment communication training happening for the students, that there were some opportunities to give presentations on the research that we were doing, but not really about like communicating science to non-science audiences. There wasn't enough of that. And so myself and a few friends, we actually started an organization when we were in school. We call it the Association of Pre-Professional Life Scientists, APPLS for short. But it was focused on professional development, communication skills, enrichment activities for students that would give us some training outside of what we would normally get in our graduate and undergraduate careers. And so through that work, I developed a passion, I think, for communicating and engaging with folks about science, but not necessarily not as much doing the science. Now, I say that, of course, I went on and did scientific research, like lab bench research, for years after that. But I knew that at some point I wanted to kind of get back around to, working more with people. And so I look for opportunities to do that and continue to try to hone my skills in communication and in education and in training. And I landed sort of what's a dream job for me right now. So I'm enjoying what I'm doing. I don't know. Does that answer your question? I'm sorry.
That was perfect, because the students that might see that be like, well, I don't see that in any of my college studies. How did you get training? And I think that's the uniqueness of the pathways that we're talking, right, Lori? We're talking about unique pathways. How do we get where we are?
Absolutely. And communicating science is a discipline in itself, but there's really not any specific training for it. And so, I'm pleased to hear that you all took it upon yourselves to navigate your way and to get that support that you needed. And obviously your position now as a trainer and a leader, you have to be able to communicate, know the technical side of terminology and procedures and process methods, but also be able to talk to people who may have different backgrounds. One of the things that I find curious, especially with my work and working with high school students, is they talk a lot about their obstacles or disadvantages that they perceive that they have. Do any of you all have any experiences from your high school or even middle school career where you felt like that, like, how do I take advantage or something, or, what was some influences that may have pushed you to, push yourself or to push past any barriers?
I can kind of answer that. So, like I said before, I was the first in my family to go to college. So this whole college thing, AP courses, honors courses, was all so new to me. And oftentimes I struggled and I didn't do well in my classes, but at the same time, I talked to my teachers, I tried to go to after school help. And one thing that I do want to convey with everybody is don't be afraid to fail. If you fail, you get right back up and you try again. And I think that's one thing, because a lot of people are very hard on themselves. You might get a D on a test, or you might fail a class and you think, oh, that's it, everything's gone. But you have to learn that in life, not everything goes in a certain path, but you have to just kind of pick yourself up and keep going. And I mean, I even got told by a high school counselor, why do you want to go into science? Don't go into science. I got discouraged to go. And that actually motivated me even more. So I worked even harder. I would get up at 2 a.m., 3 a.m. to study. And that's another thing, it's not easy. You have to put in the time, you have to put in the effort, the commitment in order to make it happen too. It's good to say you're going to get somewhere, but also you've got to invest the time and work really hard in your classes too. I don't know.
Yeah.
Thank you. No, that's perfect. I mean, one of the things that I always tell people is a lot of people are afraid of failure, and the people who are most afraid of failure have really never failed, or they don't understand what failure is. So it's like science, if we had all the answers, we wouldn't need to experiment, right? So, it's sort of like good science starts off with, a hypothesis or conjecture. And what are you trying to do? You're trying to disprove, right? So that's good science. Anyone else want to make some comments?
Yeah, I could chime in on, I guess, a little more on my backstory. So much like Jenny, I was also the first one in my family to go to college. I grew up in a single parent household, so it's just me and my mom. My mom spoke no English, so growing up, I was also the translator, the form filer, so on and so forth. I think one of the, as I navigated kind of school, I think in general, all of the right things to do were presented to me, right? So I knew what classes I needed to take. I knew in general what opportunities were available. I think the biggest difference that I saw versus with, I guess, people coming from wealthier households, for example, or or people from there are multi-generational doctors and lawyers and so forth, are the sense of belonging, right? I think the idea is for the kid from the immigrant household, yeah, he knows what to do, but there's no expectation of him becoming the doctor or becoming the lawyer. It's there, you can do it, it's nice when it happens, but there's no real expectation of that happening, right? And I think that's the key difference when people look at the panelists on this call. I want people to expect, people of color, people who may have either a disability or come from the LGBTQ community. They should expect to be there. This is not a nice to have. This is not a, let's open as many doors as we can to let people in and so on and so forth. They should be able to look into a corporate board and see themselves, right? So for me, I think that was the key thing that I saw, or that I noticed as a difference, right? There's always plenty of people telling you, okay, this is kind of the pathway. You have to take this test, you have to take that. Counselors are usually fantastic people. They always help out, but it's always the sense of belonging that typically ends up being the thing that pushes a lot of people out. Right?
Thank you for sharing. And I completely agree with that, because we have these stereotypes in science. When we think of what is research, a lot of times this mental or physical picture comes up of a white man with a white hair and glasses and a white lab coat, so having that sense of belonging, having a sense of community of that there are people like me who geek out, in STEM subjects. And, so having to find that community, I think, is really important. Thank you for that. One of the questions that popped up in the chat that I thought would be kind of pertinent here is, what was some failures that you may have had that ended up motivating you to get to where you are now? Did you encounter any specific failures?
I guess I can pop in on that one. I think one of the things that I mentioned very casually was the struggle that I had in forestry, but I did mention the struggle transitioning from a smaller HBCU to a really large, predominantly white institution. So going from Tuskegee to Duke, I experienced lots of challenges, not academically. Academically, I did well. But one thing I can say, and yes, I'm promoting HBCUs, is that they really, really nurtured me in a positive way. I mean, I felt like I could do anything when I left Tuskegee. And so one of the first things that happened when I got to Duke, they asked for someone to speak and represent the program. And I think it was to like the Duke Board of Trustees. It was a pretty big presentation. And so I got in the room, got ready to present, and I freaked out. Like, Zakia was the person you called on for public speaking at Tuskegee. Like, that was my thing, right? But just being in a new environment, seeing a room full of people that looked nothing like me, I goofed it up. Like it was really bad. And so I think from that moment, I had to realize that for one, I was in a new environment. I had to give, I'm talking, baby. I had to give myself some grace. And I also had to learn that when you are in new places, it's okay to take some time to adjust. I think I probably should have taken more time, which somebody says, that's crazy, it's just a new school. Well, there were a lot of different things that came up for me. And so I think the two things I learned were give myself grace for one, and for two, give myself time to adjust. And eventually, you know, that's like way back of the mind. But I think it was a learning for me, and it was kind of humbling in some ways, right? Places where you think you're super strong, there are areas where you'll have gaps. So anyways, that was one failure experience for me.
And just to piggyback on what she said, for those that don't know what a HBCU is, you want to tell them that? That's okay.
So
Oh,
a HBCU is a historically Black college or university. So Tuskegee is one of the best. I'm a little biased, but it's in Alabama, and it is a historically Black college or university. The school population when I was there was about 3,100 students, so it's also a pretty small school. I have two high school girls, one of which who is very interested in North Carolina A&T, and that's a really big HBCU. So just like other schools, they vary in size. So
they have Shaw up there in Raleigh that is really working hard to try to update, if you will, everything that they have so that they don't keep declining. You just have them. We have quite a few of them here in North Carolina too. So just kind of want to throw
Carolina
that.
Central has an awesome biotechnology program, I think.
Oh yeah, North Carolina Central is amazing. And a lot of students don't realize that until they're there. And then they're like, whoa. So thank you for that. Anyone else want to talk about a specific, so-called failure? We all define failure differently. So I don't want to give a negative spin to it. Sometimes it is a positive thing.
Or limitations that, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll share, and you're gonna make me cry thinking about this, but I coming out of high school, so I also went to an HBCU, one of the best in the world, Tennessee State University. Shout out to the Tigers. But coming out of high school, going into college, I was not focused. I had been a good student. I had been an excellent student in high school and middle school, and got good grades, and work came too easy to me, especially in the sciences. And I assumed that going into college, it was going to be, again, just pretty easy for me. And what I didn't realize or didn't take enough appreciation of was that also life is happening to you. You're becoming an adult when you go to college, and you're no longer able to lean on your mom or your church as much. Your friends are maybe not there. You're making new friends. It's a lot of new life happening, right? You're living on campus, and I got really distracted really early, and wasn't focused, and I let that affect me academically. And so when I went off to school with a full scholarship and everything paid for, after a couple of semesters, I had lost that. And now I had to scramble to figure out how to get back into college and how to continue my journey. And in fact, it's one of the reasons why, I say that it's a failure of mine. But I also see it as a blessing because when I went to college, I went in as pre-med, because I was one of these students too that was interested in biology and thought that the only career I could do was to become a doctor. So I went into college as a pre-med student. Lost my scholarship, had to step out of college and try to find my way back. And it was coming back into school that I realized, I'm really not so passionate about human medicine. I've always been passionate about food systems and food animals. Maybe I shouldn't be pre-med, maybe I should be pre-vet. And so I made that decision when I lost my scholarship to maybe transition into the agriculture program and animal science and pre-vet program, which ended up being probably the best decision that I ever made, because I found my niche and what it is I was really passionate about. And I still didn't go to veterinary school. I became a researcher instead, because I then later on in life figured out that I really wanted to do research instead of practice medicine. But going into the animal sciences would never have happened had I not been unfocused and made the mistake and lost my scholarship and had to step out of college for a short time. And so I guess my message to everybody is, you'll have some mistakes. You know, hopefully you don't make a mistake that puts you down and completely puts you out. Hopefully you'll find a way to fight back and try to find the good, find the silver lining out of that and make the most of it, because it might just change your life for the best. So.
And Dr. Titus, I have a question for you. Were you able to, when you picked yourself back up, did you go back full time or did you have to go back part time? How did you do that?
Great question. I went back full time, fortunately, because I was able to qualify and found some scholarship money in the College of Agriculture that wasn't available to me in the College of Life Sciences at the time. So I had messed up my opportunity over here, but fortunately for me, that there was financial opportunity for me to come back full time in agriculture, and I've been with it ever since. They've been feeding me literally ever since.
Thank you for sharing that. And you brought up a good point where, you know, if most of us who are here, obviously as participants, you love life science, you love the biological sciences. And I was mentioning this to the panelists before the students signed on, is that a lot of people, you know, that I love biology, so I'm going to be a doctor, or I'm going to, you know, work in some sort of biochemical lab. And so having a better sense of what possible careers are out there, what possible majors are out there, you know, that's a difficult endeavor for young students who don't have a lot of exposure to different sciences or scientists or careers or even majors. So did any of you all experiment with different like content areas or different classes? And was any of that, you know, did you like, you know, get out of what was, you know, just the pathway of your major, and did you find anything? And is that how you got to where you were or are, I mean?
Yeah, actually, I had an interesting pathway back to science. So after undergrad, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I completely left the sciences and started working in the business field. So I did about 10 years of human resources work. But, you know, now thinking back, it really wasn't a waste of time for me, because it actually gave me the opportunity to build up my skills at networking, public speaking, organizing myself, speaking with all levels of management, leadership, employees. I did a lot of training. I did a lot of, you know, working with managers, strategic planning, that kind of thing. And then, you know, after I worked there for 10 years, I said, I really missed the sciences. So I actually went back to school. I had to take some courses over because it had been quite a while. So I had to go back to community college, and I took chemistry again, biochemistry. I took some courses, and then I ended up, you know, applying to a post-baccalaureate program, which is a program that you do in between college and graduate school. So it kind of gave me an opportunity to be in a lab and to see if it was what I really wanted to do. And I got in there and I really loved, you know, virus research, immunology research. And then I decided that I wanted to apply to grad school and become a scientist from that program. So, you know, I went from biology in college. I didn't know what I wanted to do, went into business, then went back into science. So, you know, it was not conventional, but I learned a lot about myself having done that.
And so what of those skills have transferred into the work that you do now?
Well, for one reason, it allows me to communicate better with bosses. I mean, when I'm at scientific conferences, I have to present my work. I'm able to, you know, communicate effectively what I'm doing. I can actually network with people, companies. We work with a lot of companies, we collaborate, we have contract projects. So being able to communicate the science to them, those are skills that I wouldn't have had I not had that experience.
Perfect. Thank you. Collaboration is huge in science. We know. Yes. Anyone else would like to share another aspect of biology pathway, I guess, or life science pathway?
We have a question. We
Thank you,
have quite a
Stefana.
few for you, Dr. Leggett, but we're going to
Yeah,
start with,
I'm just now starting to scroll through questions. So go ahead, Stefana. Thank you.
and if you don't mind, I'm going to stick with the ones that are career-based first, and then when we take the recording off, we can go back and ask some of those individualized questions that relate to the industry itself that may not be so career-related. So if you guys are hold on with us with that, we'll do that. But Dr. Leggett says, could you shine some light on the process of becoming a professor?
Yes, I would be happy to. I think my path has not been a direct path, so I'll share the stereotypical direct path. Most students go from undergraduate into a graduate program. Some go straight into PhD. Some people do a master's in between their bachelor's and their PhD. It just depends. Then most people go and do a postdoctorate. And so that postdoc is usually at another university, where they get some experience kind of designing projects, writing grant proposals, things of that nature. And then they transition into becoming a professor. My path was a bit non-traditional. So I did a non-thesis master's at Duke, which is rare. Most people do a Master of Science. And if you have questions about that, I can talk through that. And then I went through and did PhD. After that, I actually went straight into forest industry. So I did not do a traditional postdoc at a university. And then I left there after I had little people because of the travel. I was doing a ton of travel, which was really exciting when I was first married. But then once I had little people, I started missing stuff. And so I said, I don't really like this. So my husband and I started a business. And so I ran the business for a couple years. And then I went and decided to teach a course to kind of guest lecture at NC State. And I was actually transitioned into a permanent position. It was called a provost, I think, opportunity hire. And so my path was a bit non-traditional, but like I said, stereotypically people go from bachelor's to master's to PhD to postdoc, and then from there they become professors. And real quick, there are two different types of professors. They are what we call teaching professors that spend most of their time teaching courses. And then there's research professors that spend most of their time doing research. And I'm actually kind of 50-50. So I teach, but I also do research. So that's a good question.
Thank you. Yes. Here's an interesting question. Are there any other interesting or unique scientific fields that you've learned about recently? We know that science is constantly changing. When we think of technology, AI is the current buzzword, that type of thing. But in your fields, are there any unique scientific fields or things that maybe you would encourage students to pursue or consider?
One thing that I actually learned about after I'd gone to grad school is the clinical laboratory science program. And it's actually, it's laboratory science, but it's not completely research based. So for example, you would be working at a microbiology lab and somebody in the hospital would send you a blood sample, and you'd have to identify what pathogen it is that is affecting this person whose blood they received. There's also blood bank scientists that also do, it's also lab based, but it's a little different because it's not just research based too. So that I thought it was an interesting field. You can do that with just a bachelor's degree. There are clinical laboratory science certificate programs. For example, here in California, we have Cal State Dominguez Hills. They run a clinical lab scientist program, as well as Cal State LA. So that's an option if you don't want to do like research science, but you do like working in the lab. So that's something that I hadn't heard of before.
And we're getting some really great questions. One, I'm gonna go back to the top. It's asking about medical technology. It's kind of like which came first, the chicken or the egg? But it's like, is that really based on biology, or is biology really based on medical technology? Is there a differentiation? That's one of the questions coming up. Like, how do they influence each other?
I only have a little bit of insight to this. So one of the whole areas of our business at Zoetis is in what we call bio devices, right? And these are instruments that are engineered and designed to focus on drug delivery right into the animal. And so, for example, we have a line of devices that instead of giving chickens vaccines subcutaneous, like into their bodies, we can actually inject the egg before the chicken ever hatches, and so the chicken is already vaccinated before they ever hatch out. We have other devices along in our bio device business. In my opinion, and again, this is not my area of expertise, but in my opinion, the biology comes first, because in this sense, the devices are intended to make delivery of the drugs and the interventions and the therapeutics more efficacious, work better for the application that we're trying to do. And so I don't know, others may have difference of opinions, but that's when I think about the work that we do for the population that we serve, it's the biology that comes. We have to develop and in fact, Dr. Davies has talked about mouse models. We do a lot of work with mouse models and chick embryo models and other things. All of that work has to come first before we ever think about how we actually then go and deliver. Because in poultry and agriculture, we're talking about needing to vaccinate millions of birds per day. And so it's the application of those therapeutics that comes after we've developed really good therapeutics in the lab. So anyway, that's my 2 cents. I don't know. Others may feel differently.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Dr. Tyus. I mean, I think biology and technology go hand in hand. I mean, we have a grant with the Department of Defense, and something that they're very, very interested in are ways in which we can deliver vaccines using a device that a doctor can use. I mean, a soldier can use out in the field. So that's where, you really have to integrate the technology and the biology as well. So, we're looking at devices where you can spray your nose, like you use with nasal drops, that kind of thing. So the two are they really do go hand in hand. And it's important that they do mesh together. So there's a lot of grant opportunities at the moment where you can integrate both the biology as well as tech too. So they're looking a lot for those collaborations. I mean, just with the coronavirus vaccine, how are you going to make that much vaccine for everybody? So just increasing manufacturing, making it easier to produce these products to go out in the field. I mean, there's some technology that went along with that we were able to do because, a lot of money was invested to making that vaccine happen. So they're very, very well integrated.
And I'm looking at Dr. Acme, you had mentioned you were in a startup. So to me, you're talking now adding the component of business administration, entrepreneurship. How does that weave into biology, and how's that working as you're working there?
No, absolutely. Working in a startup is a very different beast. You're almost taking the best and the worst from both academia and industry and rolling those together. In academia, there is a sense that you can do kind of this pure research, right? You can focus on the research and innovation. And I think that lends itself to a small startup, right? Because basically that's what you can't do. you are still dependent on effectively begging for money, right, in a slightly different form. So rather than grants from either government agencies or corporate grants, you're asking VCs, venture capitalists, or some other investor group to basically support your research and support your business plan. On the same token, you're actually having to wear a lot of hats, because rather than having a fully fleshed out staff and whatnot, you have to do a lot of things just on your own, right? Because you have to wear your hats as your business grows. And you also have to be able to develop a business plan. You have to be able, to, again, communicate the science effectively to certainly experts in the field, but also non-experts, including investment groups and so on and so forth, to communicate what you're doing and be able to basically sell your idea and your vision for what you're doing. There's a lot of HR, right? You have a team under you, so you're going to have to manage people, egos, personal aspirations. You're going to have to develop strategies for certainly the research, but also for the company's trajectory. How many people am I going to need 5-10 years down the road? What equipment am I going to need 10 years down the road? So you're just wearing a lot of hats, when you're working in this type of environment. And to your point, rarely is there an educational program that teaches you to do these things, right? I was trained as a scientist, and that's what I was trained at. That's why I tend to harp quite a bit on enriching your lives with as many experiences as you can, because you're just going to have to be borrowing from all of these different life experiences, and odds are, and especially in an entrepreneurial environment, you're innovating. So likely no one has done what you're trying to do. So there is no set strategy or set plan for you to follow. You're going to be making it up largely as you go along. And the only way to do that is, again, if you can find parallels to other fields, parallels to some other activity that you may have done at some point in your life. And really, that's really the main way I've been able to push our company and push myself as far as it's gone, by being able to look across different disciplines, across different industries, and say, hey, what can I steal from them that might apply to what I'm doing?
Laura, you mind if I ask them this?
No, keep going.
So that, for somebody that is strictly researching biology, that would sound stressful. But for you, as one of the questions is, it seems like it motivates you, it energizes you, it's interesting to you. So how do you come up and decide on those things? It says, how difficult is to get into the science field? Oh, someone else was talking about rewarding. Sorry about that. This sounds like it's a rewarding part of your job, where somebody else like, oh, that's just too much going on. Where you're saying, yes, bring it on. I call it scrumify your life. So I'm a scrum master, right? So that's what it is to me. It's like, you don't have a definitive plan. You just working it as you go. And it's exciting. How do you keep that going? How did that get to you as opposed to just the straight and narrow?
Yeah, so I think someone also mentioned kind of knowing yourself, right? And I think that's such a critical aspect. I'm not a minutia guy. A lot of people are really good at getting the minutia right. I'm not, but what I am good at is bigger picture things and connecting different activities, different people, different ideas, and be able to connect those, right? If you're in the minutia, it's very hard to step back and look across and do these things. But both ways of thinking are absolutely crucial to the success of any project or company, right? It's not that one is more than important than the other. We need each other, but we both need to realize what we're good at and placing ourselves in those right situations and scenarios where we can both succeed, the project can succeed, and ultimately, you know, in my case, the company can succeed. And that comes to, again, knowing what you like to do, or what situations you work best in. If you ask me to, you know, run through a million numbers on a lab notebook, I'd be done. I'm out, right? That's just not me. But I know plenty of people that do. They love that, and I love them for loving that.
And I think you all have confirmed my idea, or one things that I always say is, you know, if you love life science, if you love biology, if you love a physical science like chemistry or something, those are not discrete subjects. You know, if you're majoring in biology, you're taking classes in virology and zoology and ecology and microorganisms, and, you know, so there's so many different pieces that are interwoven. And then you all have provided evidence of, you know, other content area or other careers that have contributed to your own pathway and to your own successes. So you all said it much better than I have. I think I was trying to do a summary and not doing a very good job at it. So I appreciate that. Some of the other questions that I've been seeing is, you know, when you're, Dr. Ekme, he says, when you're thinking about the big picture, do you realize that the smaller details are before, or do you start with a big picture and then you have to zoom in? Or do you rely on other people to do the zooming and you were the big picture guy?
So both, right? You know, it's funny, again, stealing from other disciplines. Like there's, if you think of like, there's a field called mass spectrometry, right? And you can either, you know, start with the minutia and then build up, right? Build up the proteins and build up the structure of what you're doing. You can also do top down, where you work the other way. You know, the way we do it here is very collaboratively, where, you know, we do get together and look at it from both approaches, right? I again have what I would call the top down view, where I try and look at it big picture and what needs to be done on the minutia level, on the small picture level, that can align with the big picture level. But at the same time, I ask the question, what is being seen at that detail that I'm missing at the equal side view, right? How do I need to reorient the big picture strategy to take into account what's happened, what you're seeing when zoomed in, and it has to be both, right? Because otherwise it's a very biased view as well, right? Because it becomes, okay, this is it, you know, no matter what happens, this is what it's going to be. So I think for the best possible output, it has to go both ways.
Yeah, discovery is definitely not a one-way street, so to speak. So
It's a process. It really takes time. I just saw a question come in, you know, about having different careers and things like that. You have to give yourself the time to be able to explore what your interests are, and what you're, like I said before, you know, what it is that you're really good at. You know, and I think, you know, giving yourself the freedom to do that, trying different jobs, for example, if you're interested in a particular area, try getting an internship, you know, through the city, you know, or try going and get a job when you're in college in like a biotech company, you know, just, I know sometimes it's easier said than done, because sometimes you need to have the networks, but also like trying different things out to know what your strengths are, and giving yourself the opportunity to learn more about yourself, and eventually you'll know what your strengths are. You know, I think eventually you get to the point where you're like, you know what, I'm a really good communicator, or I'm really good at just analyzing data or being on the computer. And, you know, just knowing that about yourself, it'll kind of click as you go along. but you wouldn't know that unless you give yourself the opportunity to try different things out.
So I'm going to kind of reword one of these last questions because I think it's interesting, but the question reads specifically, I noticed that a lot of people end up changing your career path, such as starting off thinking you want to be a doctor and then you end up with some kind of research. And so their question is, how do you know when you've found that career job that is best suited for you? And I want to add to it, have you found the best job that is suited for you? Or what would you like to do next?
I think you find it when you are passionate and you look forward to going to work, right? I don't know that you'll look forward to it every single day, but most days you look forward to going to work. I think there are pieces of my job, if I'm honest and transparent, that I don't enjoy as much as others, but I am intentional about trying to carve out time for the things that I do enjoy. So I really enjoy students. I really enjoy exposing students to opportunities. I can't do that 100% of my day because I have to write grants and write publications. I'm on the call, baby, and write publications. But I think one of the things that has helped is being able to fill in the gaps of stuff that I don't enjoy with stuff that I do. And I hope that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. I mean, you know, and you had mentioned in forestry science that you do a lot of different things from the soil to actual plants. So it's almost like you have too many questions. And so then you got to just find one and let yourself focus on that one and then go to the next and feel that passion.
And Ray, I think you were touching on something else that's important too, that, you know, there are seasons for everything, right? And so I think I have found the right job for me right now. But previous jobs I've had were perfect for me then. And I suspect that at some point I'll be doing something different. You know, there was a time, you know, our grandparents, you know, they would get a job and they worked that job until they retired, you know. That is rare today. And so I would encourage the students on the call to not be afraid to do something, do it well at a high level, give it your all, but be open to trying something new too. And moving on and taking what you've learned and what you've done well from that and applying it, leveraging that and applying that to the next thing that you do too. That's what I would do.
Perfect.
I agree. I'm always learning. I'm learning about myself. I'm learning about my job, and I've been a professor at a college. I've done academia lab science. I'd also like to try at some point working in industry and biotechnology. So that's something I'm exploring at the moment too. So, you know, I'm flexible and I'm constantly learning. So.
And I think the stigma of staying in one place is no longer like it was in our parents' day. You know, my dad stayed on one job, retired off of that job. It was his first job and he kept it after the service. But in this day and age, there is that stigma is no longer there that you got to stay in one place. And I think, like Mr. Titus said, once you find who you are, and I said, bring your whole self to the work, that's how you begin to see if it's going to fit for you. If I can't bring my whole self, I'm a African-American, short-haired Black woman, you know, if for some reason that's not fitting for someone or some place, then I can't bring my whole self there. I'm if you know anything about Myers-Briggs, I'm typically seen as an ENTJ or something like that. And I've done other personality tests to see who I am before I insert myself into the work. Would you say that that fits best when you're trying to decide even for what area, even though it's biology, there's so many different areas that you can look at the artistry of it, or you can look at the technical side of it and see who and what fits you. Is that a good implication of what you guys would say?
Yeah, absolutely.
There's been a couple of questions worded in various forms, but a lot of it's about networking. So what advice about networking, particularly, you know, in biology, life sciences, or any area that you would have for students in high school and in college?
I think networking is key. I think one thing that I tell students is to keep in touch. So even when you meet someone and say you're a freshman in high school or a freshman in college, kind of update that person on highlights. You know, for me, when I meet students, I like to hear about their progression. You know, hey, Dr. Leggett, I just got this internship. Hey, Dr. Leggett, I just got into summer ventures. Just kind of keeping people in the loop, because we want to celebrate with you. And it's nice for us to be able to have a touch point before you actually, quote unquote, need something. And so I tell students, even if people don't respond, keep them up to date with what you have going on, especially if it's somebody that you feel like you may want to circle back to for opportunities. Pause. I'm sorry, I'm doing homework while I'm talking, y'all. But I think trying to be intentional about staying in touch with people is really important, because if you wait 4 years down the road, then I'm like, okay, who is this student and where did I meet them? So it seems weird, but shoot us emails as you go about your years through high school and college.
Yeah, and you have a great resource at school. You have your teachers. I mean, they've had their own career paths, you know, they have different experiences and they can give you advice. You know, if you're interested in one area or the other, they could probably maybe sometimes even make a connection. You know, once you get into college, then you'll be able to talk to your professors, have them get to know you as a person. Because, you know, I would have a lot of students like Dr. Leggett, you know, come up to me and say, I need a letter of recommendation for a summer research program. And then I would say, well, who are you exactly? You know, so, and then, you know, the letter you write for that student is very different to the letter you write to the student that's been keeping you updated. You know, oh, you know, I'm doing an internship at this company and I've done this or I've done that. So, you know them as a person and you write a much better letter for them for their research program or for grad school or whatever the case may be. So talk to your professors, talk to your teachers. That's so important.
I will say don't have an overly narrow definition of networking either. You don't know who will become critical down the road, right? And that includes your classmates, right? Or someone else in, I don't know, in karate class or what have you, right? You just don't know. Also, don't be afraid to network somewhat on your terms either. So like I'm a naturally introverted person. I don't do well with a ton of small talk or larger events where you have to mingle and so on and so forth. So typically I like to find opportunities where I can interact with people that's based around, say, like a subject matter that I enjoy, right? So committees and panels, right? So things of that nature where I'll practically, you know, say, hey, I would love to be a part of this, you know, and it's a smaller setting, it's intimate, it's about a particular subject. That's still networking, right? You know, networking doesn't have to be, you know, it doesn't have to look any particular way. So don't hesitate to create environments or leverage environments in which you are more comfortable networking in, and push into those.
And
And
someone,
when I was, oh, sorry.
no, you go ahead.
When I was in high school, I was a senior or a junior, I can't remember. It was a long time ago. But I actually became a TA for one of my teachers, one biology teachers. And just being a TA, being her TA, I got to know her personally. And she gave me tons of advice and she made me really interested in science because I'd realized that she had gone into research too. So, you know, you never know. Just something simple as volunteering at the hospital or being a TA. You know, networking happens without even knowing it sometimes.
And someone had a question about what advice would you give for gaining confidence to talking with teachers and professors?
I think with technology, it's easier because you can shoot an email.
Yeah.
You don't have to actually walk up to the teacher and talk to them. And my girls draft emails all the time to their teachers. So get your parents or somebody you trust to read over it. But if it's intimidating or a little awkward for you to walk directly up to a teacher, I would suggest sending an email.
And I can hear some exhaustion in some of the emails. I mean, in some of the text, just like, how do you maintain the self-discipline in the long and challenging programs? You can hear the drudgery, right? How do you get that joy? How do you push yourself when it's exhausting?
I think you celebrate the wins along the way, right? Instead of focusing on the end goal and what the end of the program looks like, you know, celebrate that 95 on that test, that quiz today, you know, or celebrate, you know, being able to, you know, you've done some research and you've participated in a research project and had somebody review your work and give you some feedback. Like, celebrate that, you know. For me, it's so important, even as, you know, and a working adult and parent and all of that. Celebrate the wins every day, wherever you can find them.
And
That's
also
great
live
advice.
life. You know, you have to live life too. Do things that interest you. You know, like Dr. Ekme said, is we draw from different things. You know, I like running, so I run. You know, other people like playing music, and just, you know, that's a good way to keep a healthy attitude. Is not just, you know, always work, but also give your time to enjoy life and be with your kids or be with your family or play the violin or do whatever it is that you enjoy too.
And I think we got just one more time for one more question so we can do a couple of other things. We are drawing nigh on the time. I really appreciate this engagement. It says, any advice on what factors we should think about when picking a major? What kind of advice would you throw in there?
I'll pop in real quick and say salary, which is very non-traditional. I know a lot of people say follow your passion. I'm on the other side, especially now that I have teenagers ready to go to college. And I know people might disagree, but this is my opinion. Think about where you want to be. And when you start looking at careers, also look at salary. You might still decide to choose it, even though the salary is low, but at least you're aware. I'm very surprised when students finish up with certain majors and they have no idea about the potential, I guess, as far as salary. Because as a parent, we want you all to be independent at some point. So that's my 2 cents.
You know what, when you say that, I was just reading an article today and it was saying that the graduating classes coming out of colleges this year are disappointed that they have a bar set for them of income of their first job would be like 80,000 or more. And the median really is about 56 or so. So you see that big old $30,000 gap. But I'm thinking to myself, why didn't we have an idea of what that looked like before you left school to know that that's what that would look like? So you're right about that. Doing that research on the industry and the salary projections, and projection is just as important as the initial salary. So you know what you can get into as you move forward, or will it stable off all throughout your career? So that's an important one. Anybody else?
I agree 100%. It's not just about what you're passionate about, but do the research. I mean, I had a lot of students that would tell me, my parents want me to go straight from undergraduate to graduate, and I have to follow this path. And I would tell them, well, what do you know about this field? You know, what do you know about physical therapy? Have you ever worked in it? You know, and then they would just kind of pause and think, well, I don't know. I don't know what my job prospects are going to be. So do the research first before you jump into something. Work in that industry first before you jump into it.
And Lori, I'm going to pull us back, if you will, and get your slides going. Again, we can come back and answer some of these small questions that you all had, some specific ones, maybe not as career related, but questions that you had. So I don't want to turn you off from there. But if you don't mind, I'll pull them back into the shared screen. Is that okay?
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that Dr. Tyus and Dr. Ekme alluded to specifically is that, in their fields, there's been a lot of changes. I mean, if we think about how our society and our climate and our use of technology and our need, our pandemic, how life has created new opportunities for study and for exploration and for careers and pathways. So I would like to take this time to thank our panelists. You all have done an amazing job. I'm inspired. I was a teacher, so I knew what my salary was going to be becoming a teacher, and that's okay because I chose it and I'm happy with it. And so that's one of the things we like to do that. So before we finish tonight, we do want to advertise that we do have one more webinar scheduled before during the spring semester. And that will be on May 23rd, where we're going to have a focus on engineering topics and panelists. And so we welcome students and teachers and parents and anyone to sign up for this 4th webinar that we're going to have before summer.
That's us. And for social media connections, if you don't mind, each one of our partners each have their own handles. So feel free to jot those down and take a look and keep in touch with us. Like we said, keeping in touch is just as important as gaining the information. So we do thank you for that and appreciate all the information you guys have hopefully gained a lot of detail. I know we had a survey, so I'm going to go ahead and cut off the recording, and then we can go back and handle some of the things that you guys